Hi, here we are, and we are recording, and of course I'm at the bottom of the line. So here you go. We're doing business ethics, an introduction. So these are 5 questions we'll answer, I hope, in this short lecture. Number 1, what is business ethics and why is it important? How can business leaders encourage their companies to act ethically? This is a big one. How do duty-based ethical standards differ from outcome-based ethical standards? And then we'll look at 6 guidelines to help you evaluate whether your actions are ethical or not. And then we'll also look at the type of issues that kind of arise from international business transactions. It's getting to be a really big thing because we're such a global economy right now. So let's begin. So what is business ethics? You can read the book, and I'm quite sure you all know how to read. Number 1, you're looking at it in layman's terms. Ethics is a framework for making decisions using moral principles and values, or basically right from wrong. How you feel about the decisions you make. If you add business on top of that, okay, we're looking at decisions we make in a business environment that are right or wrong. Are they ethical? Many people say that business ethics is an oxymoron. And in many cases, sometimes you can see how that could play out. But I think if you look at business from a long-term view, if you make good and correct and moral decisions, in the long term you will make a better profit and probably stay in business much longer than if you just look out for the profit end of it. There's something called the moral minimum, which kind of basically involves if it's legal, you can. It's supposed to be ethical, but the question becomes, just because it's legal, is it ethical? I can give you a really good example, one that's close and personal for me, is I live out in the country. There's a farmer who has a feedlot right across from me. It's perfectly legal for him to have that feedlot, but is it ethical to put a feedlot within 50 foot of somebody's front door? I mean, really think about that. So even though it's legal, is it right in many cases? Legal versus ethical behavior, like I just mentioned, there's a lot of gray areas for that ethical dilemma to show up. And one thing that many people don't recognize or realize, business ethics can be much more complex than personal ethics. Usually when it's personal ethics, you're dealing with an environment you totally can control, and it may just be you that is involved. Whereas when you come into business ethics, there are so many other variables that come into play. There are so many other priorities. There are many more things to think about. So why is business ethics important? The bottom line, and I don't think the book goes into this too much, is basically democracy and a free market system succeed because companies build trust, because they make sound decisions, and because they build sound reputations or solid reputations. If we didn't have trust in a company, if we couldn't believe that their financial decisions were sound and that we could depend on them, would we even invest in them? How long would they stay in business? You just literally have to look back over the last 15 years to see how many companies have went out of business because of poor ethical decisions. From WorldCom to Enron to AIG, GM almost went belly up. I mean, there are many companies that have made poor ethical decisions that have failed. So kind of keep that in mind, because business ethics are very important to our democracy. India has a very poor system, even though they are a democracy. Their business system is very corrupt. They have some very big issues with small businesses starting up. Their economic engine just can't quite seem to get started because of some of this. They're starting to clean that up. So their economy should be taking off and be much more sustainable. So there are two examples of an ethical dilemma. One, and we're going to kind of follow these throughout this little talk. One is you're a manager. There are 4 factories, and you have to close one of them. How will you make that decision? How do you make that decision and know that it's an ethical decision? There is a bookkeeper, and that bookkeeper has been asked to change a profit and loss statement by a manager so that the company looks better on paper. What do they do? You know what? That's an uh-oh. And this one right here is probably one of the hardest decisions you're going to make. There are many variables that come into play for this bookkeeper. So we'll kind of discuss that as we go through this. Here's a question that's going to show up on the screen. True or false? If an act is legal, is it always ethical? Now this this section here is how can business leaders encourage their companies to act ethically? That's such an interesting question because there is such a contradiction between serving your stockholders, your shareholders, and getting maximum profit for them, and staying within ethical guidelines. How do you do that and stay employed? So you've got the attitudes, management attitudes. Your managers have to commit to ethics. They have to truly believe that ethics is one of the most important things that they exude to their employees. If they don't do that, you're going to have a hard time controlling that company ethically. Because employees tend to follow what the management does. They should also be very careful. Let's say I have a top salesman, and the methods he uses sometimes, they kind of make me nervous, but hey, he's keeping us in the top bracket. I just won't look at, the methods he's using. That is the worst thing in the world that you can do if you're trying to keep your department ethical. If you look the other way, then many other people start looking the other way when things don't work, or when things are a little bit off. The other thing and this is so responsible for so many unethical things that happen in a company, is the incentives we use. If somebody gets a 25% bonus if we meet X sales goal, that's a considerable incentive. So you're going to see some people use some interesting means of getting that sales figure. You have to be very careful about the incentives you use. The other thing is many businesses need to, or are right now, creating ethical codes. And this kind of gives you guidelines to follow. It's not the be-all, do-all, but it is a really good start, and it puts a focus on ethical behavior. This is what we this is what we stand for. And then many companies are now training for ethics. There's quite a bit of controversy about if you can train for ethics. Basically what you can do is start people thinking and also set up the boundaries. It is a tough balance. There are compliance programs. There are 3 actually. 3 big ones. First one is Sarbanes-Oxley, which is called SOX, and that was an act put out in 2002. There are also 2 others. You have the Fair Trade Commission that follows business, and the SEC. that regulate business to try to keep things within ethical boundaries. The SOX, or Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, is mainly for publicly trained corporations, but many small businesses that aren't publicly trained are finding that they too have to follow this act, because if they work with a publicly traded corporation, there are certain reports that have to be put out. So it kind of trickles down. Some companies don't encourage their employees to whistleblow, so to speak, and this act tried to take away the stigma on that. They need to have employees need to have a way to anonymously report unethical behavior, and that's part of the SOX Act. The other thing, it was put into place simply for companies like Enron, WorldCom, Tyco, Adelphia, Global Tel, Link, HealthSouth, and Arthur Andersen. There were some fairly bad scandals with these companies in the early part of the century, in 2000. And what this act covers is the financial reports. They have to be certified by your auditors, also by your officers. The accuracy needs to be certified. There can be no conflict of interest. There have to be certain internal controls in place. If there's a change between quarter 1 and quarter 2, instead of waiting to quarter 2 to report that change, it needs to be reported at the time of the change in their financials. And then there's some criminal sanctions. CEOs can go to jail. Officers can go to jail. They've been written right into this act, which hopefully gets the attention of some people. The question comes back to is, can you legislate ethical behavior? Let's kind of look at this year here, 2002, when this came into place. These are very stringent, and they're very restrictive than anything we've ever had before. That act came out in 2002, and when did we have the meltdown of the economy, which was 2008? This act should have stopped that meltdown. So obviously there's a little bit more that needs to be done than just put out legislation. And we have, 3 or 4 big agencies now watching publicly held companies. So and I'm sure that there will be more. Again, you have to ask, can you legislate ethical behavior? Some of the ethical transgressions that they were trying to stop is a stock buyback, also known as treasury stock. A company will look at the stock prices and see that they think they're rather low, so they'll buy back some of their stock to pump up the price, and after they do that, many of their officers, after that price gets pumped up, will sell their stock options and make money off of it. While that's not technically illegal, it doesn't look good. Some companies have been doing risky business, and the majority of this is going to be on your derivatives, which are a complex security of a way of putting that, but it's sort of like betting against whether a deal will go bad or not, or stocks will go up or not. That hit really hard in 2008. That was a major problem with some of the companies that did not make it through the meltdown. And then there is executive compensation. I believe one of the companies that we bailed out, 2008, continued their high-flying manner of living to the point of even going to Vegas to have a elite meeting on taxpayers' money. So that kind of brought up another act to stop that, and it was called the American Recovery Investment Act, or TARP. So there are many ways that companies can make ethical transgressions. It seems like the more laws we make and the more we define it, the closer we get to finding loopholes. Again, you have to wonder. Okay, what are some of the ways that companies can promote ethics within the company? That would come from this right here. So, what are some of the ways that companies can attempt to keep their company ethical? Let's go down, and our next one is ethical reasons. Okay, we've talked about ethical business ethics. How do you maintain this? How do you even start it? And where did it come from? So ethical reasoning, there are two of them. I think we show here, this is sort of a history of it. There's duty-based ethics, okay, or revealed truths. Basically, this is from religious standards. Something called categorical imperative or philosophy, mainly Kant, and principles of rights. Okay, does the action infringe on somebody's fundamental rights? Now, what are we talking about here? Okay, where does this ethic, duty-based ethics, comes from? This is more on a personal level, I believe. Where do we get our ethics? Where do we get our standards of right and wrong? Okay, we have the religious. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which is the golden rule for many people. You have Kant's philosophy, and his philosophy said humans are different from objects and have the ability to reason, and they are rational. So if you look at a situation and you say, should I do this or should I not do this? And I believe the book used the example of a student getting ready to cheat on a test or something. Ask the question, if everybody does the same thing, if everybody does this, what will happen? And reason and rationality, in theory, should rule in that situation. And then finally, there's a principle of rights, which comes from our Bill of Rights. What are our fundamental rights? Does this infringe on somebody else's right? If it does, that may be an ethical problem. It may be a wrong that we shouldn't do. This duty-based deals with the process of reasoning. Okay? Now, if you come to the outcome-based ethics, and these were developed by Betham, and then further developed by Stuart Mills, and the whole philosophy behind this is the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and it's called utilitarianism, or cost-benefit analysis, which is, do the negatives outweigh the positives? Very good example of this is we have, you're standing on a bridge, and underneath you is a train track, and there's a Y. To the left are 5 people standing on the track working on something, and to the right is one person, and there's a switch and a switchman, and there's a train coming. And at the time, right now, the switch is open to hit those 5 people. The switchman looks up and says, if I pull the switch, I will only kill one person. The question becomes, what should he do? Should he pull that switch? That's an example of utilitarianism. If they were a believer in this particular outcome-based ethics, it would be wise and cost-beneficial to save the 5 lives and sacrifice the 1. That's a good example of that. And again, this one is on the consequences of the actions, or what is the result? What will the resulting be? Will it be a negative or it will be a positive for the greatest number of the people? And here's a question, what's the difference between duty-based and outcome-based strategies? And that will be a question that shows up on the video for you. there's one other way of looking at this, and this is called the corporate social responsibility, and it deals with the stakeholder theory. And what this does is balance all the competing stakeholders, their needs. And stakeholders, you could be shareholders, employees, retirees, suppliers, creditors, customers, communities, anything that's involved, the entire world. If you look at the environment and how your company may be affecting the environment. There's a corporate citizenship implied here. A corporation is a legal person. Should it be a good citizen in solving important social issues? Think of Gates and Buffett and what they're doing with their many, many billions of dollars. They're being good corporate citizens. And a socially responsible corporation's behavior, it's interesting. The more socially responsible a corporation is, more than likely the longer lived it will be, number one. So to be a successful socially responsible corporation, when you make the decisions how to balance this, it needs to be relevant to your purpose as a company. If you take, for an example, Walmart, and Walmart's becoming a very green company, and it's becoming green because, number one, it's going to lengthen or help their sustainability, but it's also helping their bottom line, their profit. They're recycling everything. They're now using solar power. Many, many ways that they're turning their company into a self-sustaining entity so that they don't have to pay as many expenses out. So that's an example of being relevant. It kind of satisfies everybody. And then here are 6 guidelines that help you decide whether something is ethical or not. Is it illegal? Does it follow the rules and regulations of the company? If it doesn't, if it's legal, but we don't have any policies, or we don't know if it's legal or illegal, is it done in the spirit of the existing laws? I mean, does it follow existing laws or rules and regulations? It says you should let your conscience be your guide. You want to look back and see what you've promised people or promised through your corporation. And then you should look at maybe your hero or role model or mentor and see what they would do in this situation. Now, these 6 work, okay, assuming that we're dealing with a rational individual that's well balanced mentally. If you had the wrong role model or hero, this could turn out pretty ugly. So that's one way, okay, and this was developed by George S. May International. Here is a way to make a decision. First, you want to do an inquiry, asking these questions. Then you want to make a decision and develop a list. You want to discuss this with many people also, all of your stakeholders. You work together to make that decision. You want to consider if the decision can withstand moral scrutiny, and you want to evaluate if it will satisfy everybody's needs and values. Another way to look at this, common sense questions. Is it legal? Is it balanced to all stakeholders? How does it make me feel? And even further, would I like to see this decision on the front page of the paper? Or would my grandmother be proud of that decision? If you can answer just these 2 here, you're going to know whether that's a good decision or not. Okay, of the 3 strategies for making ethical decisions, which one would you choose if you were making the decision for closing 1 factory out of 4? And which one would you use if you were the bookkeeper? Your options for this are going to be duty-based, outcome-based, or corporate social responsibility. Make a selection for each one of these, and then email me your reason for each choice. You have to think just a bit about it. Finally, we look at business ethics in the global market. And there are many, many issues that come up in the global market because everybody is so different in this world. There are cultural differences, gender, alcohol, and local tradition. I think the Middle East countries, how their rules and regulations affect females, alcohol, there are many things that have to be considered. There are labor laws. Bangladesh uses child labor. Do you want to do business with a company that uses children? And what will that do to your company's image back in the United States? Human rights conditions. Think China. They still aren't a free country, but yet they have certain rights and privileges as if they are. Environmental conditions, South America, the burning of the Amazon. Do we want to buy meat and items from South America if they are burning the Amazon forests? And how does that affect the world? There's corruption violations. India comes to mind. And there are accounting differences that you need to take into consideration. Japan, the way Japan values inventory versus the way we value inventory. You want to make sure that there's a good understanding of what the financials are saying. So there is a Foreign Corruption Practice Act because of many of the things that have happened in these countries, and so it prohibits U.S. companies, directors, officers, shareholders, employees, or agents from bribing any foreign government official. Now, the interesting fact, it does not prohibit bribery of minor officials whose acts are purely ministerial, as long as those payments are legal in the foreign country, which is sort of a loophole here. But it does require detailed accounting records. It prohibits false statements, and it provides sanctions against both the company and the agents who violate it. Here's an example. Walmart in Mexico in 2011 and 12. Bribery of Mexican officials for building permits. This has cost Walmart almost $500 million for investigation and compliancy procedures. 11 Walmart executives have been replaced or left the company that were involved in this, and their shareholders or stakeholders have lost a lot of trust, not to mention that the United States government really watches their foreign activities now. So it is very important that we understand the global market and business ethics and how that affects our companies. The story for Walmart is found at this location. It's really very interesting. And I believe there's one more question you're going to be asked, and that's the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act permits bribery of minor officials as long as it's legal in the country. Is that true or false? Well, thank you for your time. This went 8 minutes over. I'm sorry. It's almost 28 minutes long. I'll talk to you in the next one. Thank you.